Bonsoir, merci d'être là à l'heure, c'est pas mon cas, désolé. Donc on est très content que vous soyez relativement nombreux ce soir pour cette intervention sur la Philharmonie de Paris, qui a été conçue d'un point de vue acoustique par Christopher Beck et parmi d'autres, qui vient de Nouvelle-Zélande pour commencer ça. Et M. Derboulet qui a travaillé en collaboration et qui va assurer aussi une partie de la traduction parce que c'est et donc on va vous écouter et puis après notre partenaire Ecofond fera une petite présentation sur ce produit associé à la coupe. Voilà, pas de bon.
Okay.
On vous laisse place.
Bonsoir à tous, merci. Dans 2 minutes, donc, moi j'étais Joël Derboulet, acousticien, gérant de l'agence française de marchandise acoustique. On est basé à Cannes. Les collaborateurs qui sont dans la pièce là ce soir. En 2 mots, marchandise acoustique, c'est un bureau d'études d'origine australienne et néo-zélandaise, une centaine d'ingénieurs, implantés dans 5 pays, 13 agences, il me semble. Qui s'est fait une réputation à travers notamment les projets de grands auditoriums, opéras, salles de concert, ce type-là aussi, à l'international. Mais à l'échelle locale, on travaille sur tout type de projets. Donc, il y a certaines personnes dans la salle ici avec qui on travaille sur des projets de tout type. On ne fait pas du tout que ça. Ça, c'est la cerise sur le gâteau. On travaille sur tout type de projets localement. Donc, M. Day nous fait l'honneur de sa présence ce soir. Donc, M. Day est cofondateur du groupe. Il est basé à Auckland, en Nouvelle-Zélande. Donc, il est en vacances en ce moment dans la région et on a organisé cette soirée. Alors, il ne parle pas français. Tout va se passer en anglais. Il va essayer de parler lentement, d'articuler. Si vraiment ça coince, si vous avez du mal à comprendre, on nous fait le signe. On va essayer de trouver, faire en sorte que vous compreniez l'essentiel. C'est pas le but du jeu. Voilà, et puis enfin pour terminer, peut-être certains d'entre vous sont sensibles au fait qu'il y a une grosse polémique sur le coût du projet. Donc on n'avait pas prévu d'en parler ce soir, même si on est au courant de ce qui s'est passé, on n'était pas du tout acteur de cette chose-là. Donc ce soir on a vraiment parlé d'acoustique et architecture, y compris pendant la question-réponse à la fin. Par contre, si certains d'entre vous veulent parler du sujet coût du projet, éventuellement, on pourra y voir M. Day pendant le cocktail après la présentation.
Merci, Joël. Bonsoir.
Bonsoir.
Bonsoir, madame et monsieur. I do apologize, je suis désolé, that my talk tonight is in English. So please, with a small group like this, please feel free to ask any questions if you don't understand something, and Joel will help translate some of the terminology. And so let's see how we go. So thank you very much for inviting me to talk this evening. It's a real honour to speak to the association and about this exciting project. So just very briefly, our French connection. My partner, Professor Marshall, of Marshall Day, has been involved with the University of Le Mans for about 35 years at the acoustics department from the university. And then Marshall Day started having French engineering students coming for their vacation job, working in New Zealand to learn acoustics during vacation. And one of those students was Joel back in 2003, and we developed a very good relationship and kept in touch. And then 5 years ago, we decided to start up Marshall Day together, primarily through Joel's enthusiasm in the Côte d'Azur. It also gives me great pleasure to be back to the Côte d'Azur. This is my second visit, and the first visit was actually as part of this project. We had a design meeting with Jean Nouvel up at Saint-Paul-de-Vence in the Hotel de Colombe d'Or, and Jean Nouvel was living there over the summer, in this very expensive hotel. And we had a design meeting, as you can see, over lunch. Well, we had lunch and then cleared the plates and the wine glasses and had a design session on the balcony overlooking the valley. And I like to tell all the New Zealand architects about this is how all French architects work. They live in hotels, expensive hotels, have lunch, and do 2 hours work. But they don't really believe me. So anyway, it was a very enjoyable session. Now, this slide shows the interior of the Grand Salle in La Philharmonie de Paris. And it also shows, this is the outer walls, and then these are what we call the nuages that are all through the room. And there's a special meaning behind these nuages in that New Zealand, the the indigenous people of New Zealand are the Maori people, and their name for New Zealand, Nouvelle-Zélande, is Aotearoa, and that means the land of the long white cloud, or la terre du long nuage blanc. And so we have this association with the nuage, and the reason they call it that is because of the geography. We're a very small island with big mountains. The winds come, the nuage form. So we always have cloud, sometimes sunshine. So I like to call it Le Grand Salle du Long Nuage Blanc. And so these nuages are a wonderful example of how really good architects, in my opinion, take acoustical recommendations and turn them into architectural features. So let's see.
Ils prennent les besoins acoustiques de réflecteurs en l'occurrence et les transforment en objets architecturaux.
So these nuages are a real feature item of the interior of the Philharmonie. And there's another feature that I'll talk about in a minute, but it's one of the characteristics of, I find, the really great architects. They work well with specialists like acoustics, make an architectural feature from an acoustical idea. Now, people ask me about this project, and I say it's the best project and the worst project we have ever worked on. And it's a bit like, I'm not sure how many of you have read Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities, which is, of course, about London and Paris. But the opening lines, it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. And it goes on and describes why. But for us, this project had the best of times and the worst of times. We went on a roller coaster up and down for 8 years from concept to completion. So it was a long time, but very up and down. So just very briefly, the Philharmonie consists of a 2,500 seat concert hall, the Grand Salle, 2 large rehearsal rooms, orchestral rehearsal rooms, and a number of small practice rooms and administration. So this is the exterior. That was the from the computer rendition at the design stage, and this is the real building at the end. So now the background to the project. The client was called an organisation called the Philharmonie de Paris. It was funded 50% by the Ministry of Culture and 50% by the City of Paris. The history behind it, the site had been allocated for something like 25 years. It's part of the music precinct, the Cité de la Musique, and the site was located at Le Parc de la Villette in the 17th arrondissement. So here's the park up here, and it's right beside the periphery. And this car park here, this is before it was built, is the site where it has been built. So you probably all know the park, the Museum of Industry and Science up here, the old markets, and this is the Cité de la Musique down here, and this was and this is the Zenith, the rock concert venue. And you can see it's populated by the Folies, is the Folies by Bernard Tschumi, and
Les Folies de Bernard Tschumi.
so they're all through the park, and there's these wonderful sculptures all through it. For those who've been there, the buried bicycle I really like, because there's people cycling all through there. It's great. So they decided then to go out to a competition, and this is, I think, a really interesting part for you architects, because it was an interesting competition how they did it. It was announced in 2006. They put requests for credentials,
Candidature.
and they would eventually choose a short list of 6. And we were in New Zealand, hadn't heard about this project, and we got a phone call from Jean Nouvel. Would you like to be part of our team to go in the competition? One of my young chaps came off the phone and said, this person from an office called Jean Nouvel has called. Do we want to be in the competition? And and he said, who is Jean Nouvel? I said, wow, one of the most famous architects in the world. So Jean Nouvel has, as you all know, has done a number of major buildings. His first one was the Arab World Institute building in Paris. Then the Agbar building in Barcelona, which is this one, the Guthrie Theatre in Minneapolis, and lots of other famous buildings. So why was Marshall Day chosen by Jean Nouvel? I don't mind admitting that we were his second choice. He normally works with a Japanese acoustician called Yasu Toyota, and Frank Gehry had convinced Toyota to go exclusive before Jean Nouvel got him. So Jean Nouvel then asked the client's acoustician who should he use for the acoustician, and the client's acoustician knew of us well. He knew about our international reputation, and he recommended, and we also do very unusual, innovative designs, which you'll see from the brief is what was required for this project. So some people say we were chosen because the Tschumi Folies were very similar to our logo. You see our logo down here, and had great similarities to the Folies, but that's just a rumour. So the submission of credentials was due on the 26th of December 2006. There were 90 pages of government forms and 98 teams submitted. And these were the teams. In the end, they chose, we found out in January that we'd been selected as one of the successful short tenders. And for some reason, they went for 7 rather than 6. And so they were now entered the competition. The competition, notably, there's no Frank Gehry on the list. And this was part of one of the downers that I talked about, in that Yasu Toyota, the Japanese acoustician, then became available, and Jean Nouvel decided to add him as a sort of personal peer reviewer.
Il a pris l'acousticien japonais qui était libre pour le coup, puisqu'il n'avait pas été dans les derniers finalistes, pour être son conseiller acoustique. Donc il y avait nous en maîtrise d'œuvre et le japonais en conseil de l'architecte avec qui on travaillait. Je vous expliquera cette façon.
And Drake Facile. He was in the background, and we didn't know what he was saying, and it was just very difficult all the way through. So, the design competition, we had 10 weeks. As I said, 7 teams.
Le concours, hein. Le concours, là.
We had a 98-page architectural brief.
Brief, c'est le programme.
And a 40-page acoustic brief. And the acoustic brief called for clarity and reverberance.
Clarté et réverbérance.
Often those conflict. When you get lots of reverberance, not so much clarity. Reduce the reverberance, you increase clarity. But Marshall Day know how to create high clarity and high reverberance.
Vous comprenez ça? Oui. C'est important parce que le projet derrière vraiment découle de cette idée-là. Hein. La réverbérance, c'est la résonance. La clarté, c'est la capacité à distinguer les sons les uns des autres. Et lorsque la musique est jouée vite, à distinguer les sons les uns après les autres. Donc ça, c'est la clarté. Et la réverbérance, c'est la résonance. Marshall a déjà fait des projets où ils arrivaient à avoir des salles avec une grande qui résonnait, mais malgré tout une importante clarté.
There were 10 objective criteria of acoustic criteria.
Les objectifs, hein, les critères.
The room had to be adaptable for all forms of music, from symphony concert, or the most reverberant, for organ concerts. So there was going to be an organ. Symphony concerts, right through to rock concerts and jazz. The architectural brief said that it must be a surround hall, i.e. audience in front, on the sides and around the back. It had to be a new typology.
Le programme demandait à ce que ce soit une salle entourée par le public, mais qu'elle devait être d'un type nouveau.
So,
c'est-à-dire pas de...
It was not allowed, you could not have a rectangular shoebox hall.
Donc il était interdit de faire ce type de salle-là, donc salle type pointe à chaussures rectangulaire, qui marche pourtant très bien, pour être acoustique.
It could not be a vineyard hall.
Donc la salle en vignoble, ça c'est la Philharmonie de Berlin.
It could not be an arena hall.
Donc pas de forme d'aréna non plus, ça c'est le Royal Albert Hall de Londres.
And it could not be a fan-shaped hall.
Et pas d'éventail non plus. Je sais pas quel rôle c'est.
Players.
L'ancienne.
Yeah. So it had to be a new typology. So that was the challenge.
C'était le challenge du programme.
So week 3, it now took 2 weeks to get the team organised, and the 2 youngsters arrived in Paris. That's my partner, Professor Marshall, who he's now 84 years old, and he's attending a conference in Hamburg next week. We have a auditorium acoustics conference in Hamburg next week at the new Philharmonie, and he's coming to the conference and I'm meeting him there. So we arrived and we rolled up, we arrived for our first meeting on the Monday of a 2-week design session, and we arrived to find that Jean Nouvel was in hospital from after an operation on his back. And so, but his colleagues said, don't worry, he's left the concept design sketches.
It's clear.
And it always gets a good laugh, that slide, but it's interesting how similar the final building is these sketches. And I'll show you at the end, I'll come back to this sketch, and it really does have some similarities. But what he's talking about here is the building and the flow under the park with 2 long, so this is a section, sorry, and the people could walk under from the park underneath, and he had this idea that they could walk over the top, actually walk over the roof as part of the park. And there are these 2 long platforms. Okay. Entry and exit. So, and did that do the merge? So, if we look at that, you can see the similarities. This is the final building, and you can see the similarities here with this glass windows here that he had for this area here, and the flow goes underneath, and here are the ramps going in and out. So there are some real similarities. So now just working through the conceptual design process. So we started off with Jean Nouvel had a very good young guy working Rhino at that stage. Remember, this is now 2007, so it's 11 years ago, fairly early days of Rhino. And he was playing with shapes like this, but that's after 1 week. That's all we had, and this is week, the end of week 3 now out of 10. This is all we had. Then one morning I was sitting with Professor Marshall having breakfast, ready to go to the design meeting, and he started sketching on the serviette. And this is a bit hard to see in that slide with this projector, but here, this is a cross section, and this is the outer wall.
Le mur extérieur.
Okay, this is a seating plan. Yes, so outer walls, and the edge of the ceiling comes across here, but ran off the edge of the serviette. And here's the seating planes, and then these are the initial ideas for some nuage and some reflectors inside the space. And you can see gaps down here.
On peut voir qu'il y a des trous entre les balcons, l'arrière des balcons et l'enveloppe de la salle, les murs.
We also like the idea of asymmetry.
Asymmetry?
Yep. So this is good. Acoustically, you have different things arriving at each ear. So asymmetry is good. Très bien. Très bon. So Harold took this. Jean Nouvel was now recovering from his back operation, and they met. He was in a hotel on the waterfront in Paris, recovering, and Harold went down and had a meeting, and this is his meeting with Jean Nouvel. Same thing, lunch, wine glasses, and Harold brings out the sketch, and Jean Nouvel says, "This is great, I really like the concept." And the concept they developed is here. This is the 3D printed model. Again, 11 years ago, pretty progressive, printing 3D models at that stage, particularly in the short time we had. And you'll see these are seating planes, blocks of seating, and we have this outer volume, and then the seating blocks, groups of seats, are inside that outer volume. And then these are our nuage floating around in the space. So we have an outer volume and an inner volume with the people. So the outer space has its own architectural and acoustical presence, and you can see the outer volume here, and these bridges would support the seating area, and people would walk in through over the bridge, see the big volume, and then walk into the seating area.
L'idée, c'est que les sièges étaient en porte-à-faux tenus par les passerelles. Donc on passait à travers le volume extérieur pour ensuite arriver dans le volume intérieur formé par tous les balcons et les nuages.
And so here's the inner space providing visual and acoustical intimacy.
Là, c'est le volume intérieur qui donne l'intimité acoustique et visuelle du lieu.
Great. And you can see this is the coloured area is the outer volume, the walls. And Jean Nouvel likes working with lighting, and so he can change the colour of the walls at any time. And he does that with a lot of his buildings. So the competition submission, there was very strict rules on what the architects had to provide. There was 5 A0 drawings, 4 A4 pages of text, 2 from the architect, 1 from the theatre designer, and 1 from the acoustician.
Ouais, donc 2 pages pour l'architecte, une pour l'acousticien et une pour le scénographe.
Then there had to be an exterior model, an interior model, which was the 3D printed model, and a 2-minute video. So here is the 2-minute video that was prepared for the competition. Oops. So remember, this is after only really a 6-week, 7-week design program. This is the final submission. So I was very impressed with the rest of the team being able to get that together after really an 8-week design program. Then 2 months later, Easter in 2007, we got the wonderful news that we had our combined design team effort had won the competition. So it was really a very, very exciting time. So we then entered the detailed design process. And there's many aspects that I could talk about that in terms of reverberation time and all sorts of things. But I'd like to briefly just do a little bit of acoustics on lateral reflections.
Donc, il pourrait parler pendant des heures, on l'imagine, d'acoustique. Il va juste pour comprendre un petit peu la base. Il va vous parler d'acoustique très rapidement et spécialement des réflexions latérales. C'est quelque chose de très important dans l'écoute de la musique. Ça n'a pas été découvert il y a très longtemps, cette chose-là. Et donc il va vous parler rapidement de ces choses-là. Et c'est ça qui explique qu'il y a certaines salles dans le monde qui fonctionnent très bien et d'autres qui fonctionnent très mal.
So, historically, the rectangular shoebox halls have had excellent acoustics. And then in the 1960s, but for those halls, the maximum audience you can have and maintain a visual intimacy is about 1,800 people, 1,800. And in America in the 60s, they were finding it uneconomic for the orchestras to play to 1,800 people. You couldn't pay the orchestra adequately and whatever. So what they did was they just took the walls out sideways and created a fan-shaped hall, and they increased the size from 1,800 to 2,500 to 3,000 people. But they were an acoustical disaster. And there's a whole series of halls built in America through the 1960s that were an acoustical disaster. Professor Marshall, my partner, was famous in the acoustical world for discovering why they were a disaster. He was at the Royal Albert Hall, which is virtually a round hall. So it has similar problems. The acoustics are not good. And he was sitting there listening, and he heard that the sound was only coming from the orchestra. The orchestra was this wide. There was no lateral energy, no lateral reflections coming from the side, making a big enveloping sound. So he went on to discover the reason, and this is a very simple, quick explanation of how it works. So this is a rectangular hall. We have the orchestra here and a listener here. And the sound that travels directly from the source to the receiver, we call that the direct sound. Then you start getting reflections, and this diagram shows a lateral reflection that comes off the side. And in a fan-shaped hall, the reflections go out to the side walls, and they don't fill this gap here. So you can see they all go down the sides here, but there's this large area in the middle with no lateral reflections. Everybody understand that? Yeah, cool. And that really is the essence of making a really good concert hall, is to provide these early lateral reflections, because they make the orchestra sound close and large and enveloping. And here are some measurements so this is an acoustical measurement that shows the direct sound there, and then it shows the strength of the other reflections coming from the side. And in this rectangular hall, you can see that there's lots of energy coming from the side. And here's a measurement made in a real fan-shaped hall, and you can see the direct sound is still there, but there's virtually nothing coming from the side. That's why they were an acoustical disaster. So that's the Acoustics 101. Is that what you call it in?
No, l'acoustique pour les débutants,
Basic.
pour les nuls.
Basic acoustics for beginners. Yeah. So we had to make sure that this big, spacious volume of the Philharmonie was going to work, and we had to get reflections in there. So we started working with a 1:50 scale model in cardboard, and we use a laser beam, just a cheap little laser beam, and reflecting surfaces. And we started working on some curving surfaces along here, and you can plot where the reflections go, because light is analogous with sound. Then we started in the next phase working with the computer 3D model, and we developed a plugin for Rhino that could plot exactly where the reflections were going, and we could twist the reflector and see where they go. And so we had a long development program with the architect. It was redone several times because Jean Nouvel's colleague thought they were too small, then they thought they were too large, and then we changed them again. And we have to and each time you change them, you have to replot all the directions of where the sound's going. So that's just one aspect of the design. There are many other aspects of the design, but that's how we had to work those design of the Nuage. To make sure every seat had enough lateral reflections. So then they went forward and put the project out to tender for builders in 2009, and the price came in at 3 times the budget. As Joel mentioned, we won't say any more about that, but basically that killed the project, and for 2 years it died, basically hibernated. And so it went into hibernation. And after various negotiations, 2 years later, in 2011, the project was all up and go and started again. So it was being built, and it was scheduled to be opened in 2014. It was delayed twice. We were set to come for the opening, but it was anywhere near being able to open. And then finally, the client decided that the 14th of January 2015, he was going to open. And he had a program set up for the whole of 2015, a booklet this thick, in A4 colour, full program, orchestras booked, all go.
Le projet n'allait clairement pas être terminé à cette date-là, mais le maître d'ouvrage a malgré tout décidé que l'inauguration serait ce jour-là. Et dès qu'ils l'ont décidé, ils avaient déjà prévu tout le planning de l'année 2015 avec tous les orchestres qui allaient venir, etc. Donc, il fallait se débrouiller, il fallait que ça fonctionne à peu près ce jour-là.
So, one of my colleagues arrived on the 12th of December. So, what was that? Before the 14th of January. So, 4 weeks before the opening. So, and this was the state of the room.
Donc, 4 semaines avant l'inauguration.
You can see there's no seats in lots of areas.
Il n'y a pas de siège.
The upper nuage is finished, but all around here there's scaffolding, there's no
Des échafaudages partout.
and here's another one. It's just a mess, a disaster. So, and this is, what have we got here? This is, 4 weeks to go. So, I arrived on the 4th of January, and all the signs were up about the opening of the Paris Hall happening on the 14th, and so it was a real thing. This is inside the room, inside the grand salle. This is the edge of the stage here. It still hasn't got the timber on it. Here, no seats.
Donc, c'est dans la salle. Il y a le bord de la scène, il n'y a toujours pas le parquet. Il y a les armatures pour les sièges, mais qui ne sont toujours pas posées.
This is one of the reflectors, not painted. It was just terrible. Basically, it was 6 days to go, then the Charlie Hebdo tragedy happened. And we were right next to where it happened. Our hotel was, this is the view from our hotel, and the door, the terrorist went in the door, that's the door of the Charlie Hebdo's office there. My colleague's wife saw the policeman on the footpath, and so it was just terrible. It was just added another huge downer. However, with 4 days to go, I then went into the hall, and this is the overstage reflector.
C'est le réflecteur qui est au-dessus de la scène, on appelle la canopée, qui sert surtout pour les musiciens.
And it's, at this stage, it can be raised up and down, and it's lowered onto the stage, and there's this light on the back of it. And I went to sit at the back of the hall, and then suddenly I could see that this hall was going to work. Because here's one of our reflectors, and here's the reflection of the ring, the light ring. So the light is going from there to here to me. And I was always worried that we weren't going to get enough lateral reflections. And here I could see, in that reflector, I could see the light ring on the stage. In one of the nuages, I could see twice. So I could see the ring here and the ring here. So I knew I was getting reflections, and we knew it was going to work. Then it came to, again, another distraction. The March of Solidarity happened on the Sunday before the opening, and that was an amazing experience for me. I was in an apartment on the Boulevard Voltaire, and 2 million people marched past singing the Marseillaise. It was extremely, extremely moving. So it then went on to that was the Sunday. The Tuesday night, we had the Hard Hat concert. The Hard Hat concert is for the people who have built the project. So all the workers, the designers, the builders.
Alors, c'était un pré-concert inaugural qui était pour les ouvriers et toutes les personnes qui ont travaillé préparé au projet.
And it gives the venue the chance to the ushers get to try and practice, and the orchestra gets to try the room. But there was no time for rehearsals. There were 250 workers, builders, working in the room 24 hours a day for 6 months leading up to this. to try and meet the deadline.
Donc, il y avait 250 personnes qui travaillaient dans la salle H24 pendant les 6 mois qui ont précédé l'inauguration afin d'essayer de terminer à temps.
Shifts, working shifts,
Donc,
24 hours a
donc
day.
aucune répétition avant le concert.
But the orchestra had no time to rehearsal. We had no time to do any measurements. So there was immense pressure. This is the hard hat concert. You can see there's still scaffolding in the room.
C'est la veille, was the day before the official release?
Yes.
Ah, c'était la veille de l'inauguration.
So this is the Tuesday. And Jean Nouvel decided to come to the hard hat concert, and he gave an impassioned speech about why he didn't think the hall should be open, the whole building shouldn't be open, and told them he wasn't coming to the opening the next night. I had to sit beside Jean Nouvel, and of course, after the first movement, he said, "What do you think of the acoustics?" And so I had to give him an honest opinion. But the telling moment for me, I was incredibly nervous. This is the first time you hear your hall, whether it's going to work or not. And I was very nervous. But one of my colleagues from Melbourne is a highly experienced violinist. He was the concertmaster for the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra in Australia. And he was there with me. He now does acoustics full-time with us. And he said he thought the sound was fantastic. The client thought the sound was fantastic. And we were all invited backstage to open the champagne and generally enter into the euphoria. And one of the most magic moments for me was, this is the principal bass player, the contrabass, principal. And he came up to me and he gave me a huge hug, and he said, "I heard angels."
J'ai entendu des anges.
So that was one of the most magical experiences of my career. It was really very moving. So then came the next night, opening night. Jean Nouvel maintained his boycott and put the pressure on us again. My partner, Professor Marshall, couldn't be there because of illness, so I was there on my own, which made it slightly easier to say, Professor Marshall says we have to attend, and because commissioning for us includes, as well as doing measurements,
Commissioning, c'est la réception.
we have to do measurements, but we have to listen. So I said we would go. So opening night came along, and we had the president, and we had the mayor, and this is the president of the Philharmonie de Paris, Laurent Bale, and he was sitting in the front row, and this is the people coming into the venue over the bridge. So you can see this is the outer volume, but still there's bits of scaffolding in here where it hadn't been finished being plastered in here. But it is a magical experience when you walk in over this bridge, see this huge volume, and then you pop through into your seating area. And so this is the opening night, and President Hollande was in here somewhere, and then this is various other photographs in the days afterwards, so you can see what it looked like. So basically just a summary at the end of what was the outcome. How are we going for time? The outcome. The external architecture is fairly controversial. Some people like it and some people hate it. Some people think it looks like a spaceship that's crash landed.
Certaines personnes ont l'impression de voir un vaisseau spatial qui a craché.
I will tell one funny story about the facade of the building. We were sitting in a design meeting very early on. It was all in French, but Jean Nouvel's colleague was sitting beside me, and the meeting was going, people were talking, and she occasionally would make an aside. "Oh my God, and then going, oh my God, in English. And so I got out of the meeting and I said, what was that all about? What was it? Oh my God. And she said, the quantity surveyor had costed, this was 30 millimeter thick aluminium, and had costed the aluminium facade only, and it was the total project budget.
Vous avez compris, donc l'économiste venait de faire le chiffrage de la façade, donc des oiseaux de 3 mm d'aluminium d'épaisseur, et une fois qu'il est fini de chiffrer la façade, c'était le budget du projet. Donc l'architecte devait s'en rendre compte à ce moment-là.
I said I wasn't going to talk about the cost, but that was one of the early panics. Obviously, that was redesigned and rescheduled, but that shows you the facade. Here's the facade again. Has the bird emblem on the outside. Very Escher-like, in my opinion, sort of almost an Escher.
Comme Stéphane Escher,
yeah.
Stéphane, l'autre, le dessinateur.
I wouldn't say that for John Neville. The underneath area, and the view from the park. So, in my opinion, the outcome is the final construction is very true to the original concept sketches. It's true to the competition design. So there's the concept sketches. There's the competition entry, the model from the competition entry, and you see the similarities, how that melds in. And then here is the final building. So really quite remarkable that that final building was so similar to the concept design model. So the internal architecture is, in my opinion, stunning. There's not many people who look at that image and don't say to me, wow. And as you look around it, this is one of the entries where you come in and enter the inner room. This is the nuages looking up, and they're changing the colour. And so I think the interior architecture is absolutely stunning. The adaptability has worked. They've had a variety of things from rock concerts here to, this might be a rock concert as well, jazz concert, and comedy nights, reggae, all sorts of things. The idea, I forgot to mention, the reason at the start of the process why it's located out by the periphery was that they decided that at the moment all the cultural buildings are tied up in the centre of Paris, which is okay for the very wealthy who can live in the centre of Paris. But they wanted to bring the music to the people, and they decided that the most likely were the eastern suburbs, and so they said this will make it easier for the people from the eastern suburbs to access the symphony, and the people from the centre could still access the symphony. And it worked. They had, from January to June, in the opening year, they had 270 concerts. They sold 300,000 tickets, and the pricing ranges from 10 euros to 100 euros. 60% of the people were new audiences.
Des personnes qui n'avaient pas du tout l'habitude d'aller dans ce type de salle.
We tried to book into a concert in November that year, in July, and it was already sold out. So it was a huge success. They have open days where people go through and have a look at it, and so it really is bringing the music to the people. The outcome in terms of the acoustics, the reviews have been overwhelmingly good, and I won't read all these out. I should have actually got these translated into French, but I think you can get the overall opinion that the New York Times, the Guardian, all wrote rave reviews. So the concert, the conductor of the orchestra,
Chef d'orchestre,
loves the space. There's a short video there that I'm not sure is working. and Simon Rattle loves the space.
Le chef d'orchestre de l'orchestre philharmonique de Londres, I think, London.
Yeah, he was the conductor of the Berlin Philharmonic, and he's just returned to London and is now the conductor for the London Symphony Orchestra. And they're trying to get a new hall built for
Les
London.
Anglais aimeraient bien avoir aussi un objet comme celui-là.
And in this
Lui, il fait du lobbying.
in this video, there's this 2-minute video, he says at the end, he says, "Lucky, lucky Paris." So that's basically it, and I'm very happy to answer questions. So, any acoustical questions you've always wanted to ask?
En français alors.
Oui, bien sûr.
Comment ils sont faits les résonateurs?
Les parois.
Oui, les parois.
Les nuages ou les parois?
Ben, toute la réflexion, elle est faite avec quoi? Avec les parois. J'ai vu qu'il y avait des.
What are the materials
Okay, yes.
used
C'est
for
la-
the batteries and the
Parce que je pense que ça a une importance, celui qui achète le matériau qui achète.
Right. So the materials in the room, the outer walls are very thick plaster.
plâtre. 5 cm à peu près la coque extérieure.
I should have started further back. Everything in the room, except for the audience, is hard acoustically. So the audience is absorptive, sucks up the sound. But everything else is reflective and hard. So the outer volume is hard plaster with bumps
Avec des trous, des perforations, des trous.
to make it diffusive, to make the sound bounce all in different
L'idée,
directions.
c'est de créer des réflecteurs, c'est-à-dire quand le son arrive, il ne rebondit pas comme une balle de billard, il rebondit dans toutes les directions. On n'a pas de réflexion franche et ça fait une
And
diffusion.
then,
Donc c'est pour ça qu'il y a ces trous, exactement, ces trous, ça va servir à casser les réflexions franches.
and the nuage are timber, plywood, laminated.
C'est du contreplaqué.
Tu vois?
Contreplaqué, ouais.
Yeah, so that it curve. Yeah. And some of the other reflectors beside the audience, they're all timber.
Tous les
as
réflecteurs
well.
sont à côté du public, l'auditoire sont en bois également.
Yeah.
Plutôt épais, hein, 3-4 cm.
That's a good question.
Donc le seul matériau absorbant de la salle, c'est le public. Ou les sièges quand la salle est vide. Ouais, tout le reste, c'est dur. Beaucoup d'écouffe.
Ça réfléchit pas beaucoup.
Dans les locaux annexes, certainement.
Oui. Et,
There's no echo phone. Sorry.
du coup, à chaque fois, vous avez, ça a été calculé, parce que j'ai déjà fait un plan sur un rapport optique d'un réflecteur. Il y a des chiffres 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
She asked if the diffusers have been calculated
Ça, vous
in
l'avez
design, because she has already seen the diffusers specific schemes with the letters.
Yeah.
Or the
the shorter fuse.
Yeah.
The number of the shorter.
Yeah, that's interesting that you know about those. So we, in this case, it's more a random design
plutôt aléatoire.
Et oui.
rather than mathematically calculated. There's 2 ways you can do it. You can calculate with mathematics and have them all in a sequence, or you can just randomly put bumps all over.
C'est
And
plus ou moins aléatoire. C'est-à-dire qu'on donne à l'architecte plus ou moins la quantité, les épaisseurs minimum, maximum, la surface couverte. Après, il joue avec. Et s'il fait ça de façon à peu près aléatoire, ça fonctionne.
Et du coup, quand vous avez contrôlé, pour contrôler, vous avez fait, si je comprends bien, avec de la lumière.
Non, c'était un peu le hasard, contrôle avec la lumière.
Ah ouais,
Les
d'accord.
jours qui ont précédé, c'était quand même tendu. Hein. Et c'est avec la lumière qu'il a vu les réflexions. Il s'est dit ça va marcher parce que le réflecteur était en bas sur la scène, là où il allait avoir les musiciens. C'est génial, j'ai des réflexions là, j'en ai là.
Ouais.
Et donc c'est la lumière qui lui a permis de comprendre que ça allait marcher pour le son.
C'est une bonne idée pour les prochains projets, utiliser la lumière pour
absolument.
voir si le son marche.
On a fait
Quand
aussi
on
une
parle
mesure.
quand on parle de random, ça peut être complètement contrôlé par l'ordinateur. On peut générer une suite de nombres aléatoires.
Absolument.
Est-ce qu'il y a une partie empirique dans une conception architecturale comme ça, En d'autres mots, quelle partie est contrôlée par l'esprit, par la conception, et quelle partie est empirique, fait partie du savoir-faire? Est-ce qu'il y a un peu d'empirisme encore dans votre débat?
Là, oui.
L'inquiétude
Là,
le plan Marshall semblait dire que Marshall semblait laisser penser qu'il y a de l'empirisme, il y a du métier, mais le résultat, on ne contrôle pas trop. Alors, à l'avance, il n'est pas trop précis, quoi.
C'est un très long sujet.
So what's that one?
Ça a été modélisé de toute façon.
How far do you control the final results? Is there a part of common empirism?
Empirical.
Is
Is
it
it empirical?
feeling,
Or is it
the fact that you control your know-how?
Yeah.
And so, what is the spread out of full mathematical control and know-how?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I understand. So, with our computer modelling, we could calculate the performance of the room and measure the performance from the acoustical 3D Rhino model. We put it into our acoustic software and we calculate the time and the number of reflections at every position, and then we go and measure, not at every position, but something like 40, and we check that the design parameters that we had in the model are actually achieved in the real room. So it all is calculated, and the measurements came out very, very close to the calculations. It is very precise, and we know exactly what everything is doing. It's no longer an art where you guess. It is now.
C'est plus de la magie, plus ou moins, comme c'était avant dans l'apparence. C'est très maîtrisé.
I
Enfin,
thought
c'est
you
très
already-
maîtrisé parce qu'il y a eu des salles qui ont été faites avant. On a fait des mesures sur nos propres salles et qu'à force de faire des mesures sur les salles, on peut comparer avec les modèles et du coup affiner nos propres modèles. Faire en sorte que les salles qui arrivent après en maîtrisent un peu mieux le résultat. Mieux.
Et j'ai vu sur les parois latérales des blocs rectangulaires de différentes tailles qui sortent plus ou moins des murs. Est-ce que la simulation par ordinateur allait jusqu'à prendre en considération ces petites formes?
Pas un niveau de détail. On disait à l'ordinateur qu'elle allait avoir de la diffusion.
Ok, d'accord.
Voilà.
And,
Là.
and the diffusion depends on the size and wavelength.
La diffusion dépend de la taille des objets et des longueurs d'onde. Alors, les objets n'étaient pas modélisés un par un. Mais l'ordinateur savait qu'il y avait un objet qui allait diffuser le son, d'une certaine façon.
Et jusqu'où la conception acoustique guide l'architecte dans ce cas-là? On me dit que les gens nouvelles, ils ne connaissent pas.
About the diffuser, how far the acoustical requirements
guided from
what was his margin of?
Yeah, okay. That's a very good question. In the design of the Nuage, Jean Nouvel did everything we wanted, basically. So they were very good where they shape and whatever, he followed our requirements. But for the diffusion, we wanted larger diffusion, bigger bumps and whatever. And it became a compromise between what he wanted and what we wanted. And it seems to have worked, but it was a compromise. And design always, sometimes, is a compromise between architecture and acoustics. Often it's a very good combination, that like the Nuage, and then sometimes, like on the diffusion, we had to compromise.
Without revealing some of your conception secrets, can you give us a few quelques clés pour prendre sur a few keys of compression of the way you made a compromise between clarity and reflection or
Reverence.
reflection?
Yeah. So in that department, there's no compromise. What I mentioned, our design philosophy, which stems from Professor Marshall's lateral reflections, is that the Nuage and the other reflectors that I showed with the light ring provide the clarity. You get early reflections that arrive within 50 to 80 milliseconds of the direct sound, and that provides clarity, and then the big volume provides the reverberance. And so the reviews all comment on this room has outstanding reverberance with great clarity. So that part of the brief was fully met. There was no compromise. It's got great clarity, great reverberance.
Pour vous rendre compte, si vous avez la chance d'y aller, c'est pas cher, il y a plein de concerts, n'hésitez pas si vous faites un saut à Paris. Une dernière fois que j'y suis allé, moi, j'étais sur le côté de l'orchestre. Il y avait, c'est un orchestre complet, il y avait à peu près la moitié des musiciens qui jouaient, violon essentiellement. Moi, j'étais à côté des contrebasses et j'entendais le bruit des feuilles de leur partition qui se tournaient. Ils étaient à 3 mètres de moi à peu près. J'entendais les feuilles qui se tournaient alors qu'il y avait les violons qui jouaient à côté. Ça, c'est la clarté, c'est-à-dire j'entendais ce que je voulais entendre. Donc ça, c'est tout à fait possible. Quand il y avait plusieurs violonistes qui jouaient en même temps, on pouvait presque distinguer les uns des autres. Ça, c'est la clarté vraiment poussée à l'extrême. Et donc, c'est les réflexions latérales dont il parle, précoces, dans les 50 premières millisecondes, après le chant direct qui donne cette clarté. Et après, la réverbérance, la résonance du lieu qui existe, effectivement, c'est un grand volume, il n'y a pas beaucoup d'absorption. Ça donne de l'ampleur. Ça donne de l'ampleur, de la chaleur au son de l'orchestre.
Mais du coup, est-ce qu'il ne faut pas absorber le son en ondes pour que ceci se réfléchisse à l'infini? On finit par plus discerner.
Ils sont parasites.
She said, do we have to absorb at some stage? Because otherwise it's
Ils sont
still
par
we
exemple.
bump,
Ouais.
I'm sure you can get the right amount with the balance of the audience and the hard surfaces.
Ok, il y a de l'absorption dans la salle. Toute l'absorption, c'est au public. Voilà, donc comme il y a de l'absorption dans la quantité qui va bien, le son décroît de la façon qui va bien.
Donc ça veut dire que ça fonctionne si l'ensemble de la pièce est utilisé.
Oui.
Et si on met la moitié de la pièce qui est hormis si le siège
On n'a pas parlé des sièges, mais c'est des sièges rembourrés qui absorbent. Donc même quand la salle est vide, l'acoustique de la salle varie assez peu par rapport à quand elle est pleine. Donc l'orchestre apprécie pour les répétitions. L'acoustique ne change assez peu.
Oui, parce que la répétition, elle est salle vide.
Bien sûr.
Does it depend on the kind of sound that's being made? You have to control for that, or is noise just noise?
Or sound, just sound.
Yeah.
If you don't design for lateral reflections, it is very dependent on the type of music that you're playing there. But one of the benefits of this designing with lateral reflections is that you can have a small chamber group play in there or a huge orchestra, and it's superb for both because of these lateral reflections giving you the clarity. The small chamber group requires more clarity, and that's there because of the reflections, and the big orchestra has the full reverberance through the outer body.
Does this mean that the configuration, the acoustical configuration of the hall doesn't change between various sizes of orchestras?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I should have shown. I should have talked about that briefly. And so you see this opening up here that actually should be closed for the symphony concert opening. What's in behind there is a whole series of curtains that can roll out in the
rideaux derrière qui peuvent descendre.
In the outer volume, and there's about 800 square meters of curtain that come out into that outer volume. We asked for 2,500 to give more variability so that when you're having a rock concert, you want to get rid of that reverberation for a rock concert. For symphony concerts, small, large, whatever, you want that reverberance, but for a rock concert or a jazz concert, you don't want that reverberance. And so these curtains come out. So that was one of the cost compromises, was basically that the amount of curtaining was cut back. And so there's a bit more reverberance during rock concerts than is ideal. But that's how we vary it with the curtains coming out of these slots. Good question.
So the geometry of the roof doesn't change?
No.
Only curtains which come down or...
Yeah, sorry, there is a change in the stage format.
Et puis, il peut y avoir des modifications sur la forme de la scène.
So,
Par terre, c'est-à-dire tout ce qui est balcon ne bouge pas, bien évidemment, mais en fait tout ce qui est en bas bouge et est totalement adaptable.
yeah. So remember the seating for the orchestra goes right around and right around the back of the orchestra here. And then for the rock concert, those seats at the back all push away behind the stage, and the stage drops down, and the stage effectively becomes the end of the room rather than within the room. The stage moves back, and so the rock concert is very frontal. It's not surround because of all your speakers and things. So the stage format is highly variable, but the acoustical configuration of the room doesn't change other than the curtains.
Okay.
But the stage is highly
Sur
variable.
scénographique, oui, il y a plus d'une dizaine de configurations de salles, effectivement frontales.
Was it a hard challenge for you to have a fixed acoustical configuration with various scene configurations, or is it something that's standard for your job?
It's something that we think now is balanced by this design. We have done some other rooms that have more variability, but what happens is that people use them in the wrong mode. So you'll come along to the symphony concert and you'll find they've got it in the rock and roll mode, and it creates errors. And so we prefer to design it for the primary function and make sure that it works really well for the other functions in that fixed mode. Okay, well, people are probably desperate for a glass of wine.
Merci beaucoup.
Okay, thank you.